ACT, you see this?
Look, if it ain't official Dana J, Primadonnanews, I don't even want to see it. Just take the time.
During both the Civil War and Reconstruction years, refugees from slavery rapidly entered various public spaces in Memphis in anticipation of new rights and freedoms. At the time, their formal political status was uncertain. They were no longer slaves, yet before black men secured suffrage in 1867, they had no formal political rights. And until a federal Civil Rights Act was passed in April of 1866, just weeks before the massacre, African Americans were denied even nominal recognition as legal citizens. Nonetheless, freed people made use of the limited power available to them to claim many aspects of citizenship. They began their lives in Memphis with expectations for freedom that included the ability to enjoy free movement, social life, and family in an urban community of their choosing, to be compensated for their labor, and to have those rights protected by law in the form of the Freedmen's Bureau and the police power of the occupying Union Army. They expected to be citizens of the city. The reaction of many whites to African Americans' entry into public life shows how powerfully their activities disrupted whites' previous norms of racial difference that were rooted in slavery. Conflicts over public space ensued as white Memphians sought to redraw racial boundaries, to discredit black people's public presence, and to oppose the new power differentials embodied in what white Memphians observed around them.
The Memphis Race Riots of 1866. In the city of Memphis, Tennessee, from May 1st to May 3rd, 1866, over 1 year after the end of the U.S. Civil War, 48 men were dead, 46 of whom were black freedmen, and most of them being veterans of the Union Army. 70 more were wounded, 5 black women were raped, 91 homes, 12 churches, and 4 schools were burned down. By the end of it, over $17,000 in federal property was destroyed in Memphis' worst race riot in history. Many black freedmen and veterans of the Civil War were forced to leave the city permanently. Even city police and firefighters made up 1/3 of the rioting mob that laid waste to the freedmen's neighborhoods. No one was persecuted after this massacre. How and why did this happen? After the capture of Memphis by Union forces in 1862, the city became a haven for refugee slaves trying to escape their former slave owners. From 1860 to 1865, the black population of Memphis increased from 3,000 to nearly 20,000. However, former slave owners in Memphis resented both their labor shortages and the groups of freed African Americans in their city, and urged the U.S. military to take action. The U.S. military decided to detain many African Americans, classified them as quote-unquote vagrants into custody, and forced them to accept labor contracts on plantations. According to local Reverend T.E. Bliss in a letter to a U.S. general, how is it that the colored children in Memphis, even with their spelling books in their hands, are caught up by your order and taken to the same place, and there insolently told that they had better be picking cotton? Has it come to this, that the most common rights of these poor people are thus to be trampled upon, for the benefit of those who have wronged them all their days? Black soldiers attempted to intervene on behalf of their people, forced back onto plantations. Tensions arose in the city. Incidents of police brutality skyrocketed. The local police arrested the soldiers for minor offenses and treated them more harshly than their white counterparts. They also shoved and beat black civilians on the streets for the crime of quote-unquote insolence. Finally, on May 1st, 1866, a large group of black soldiers and their families, wives and children included, were hosting an impromptu street party. A group of Memphis police officers was called to the scene. When the soldiers refused to disperse, the officers called for reinforcements. An officer accidentally shot himself in the leg while drawing his gun, blaming the injury on the African Americans. The conflict escalated, resulting in an officer being shot and killed. City police and angry white residents began to fire and kill several soldiers, some who were already fleeing or arrested. Eventually, in the late evening, the white mob began destroying various black homes in the area, looting them and assaulting their residents. Some of the black residents died when the mob forced them to stay inside their own burning houses. Schools and churches were also targeted and burned down. The violence continued through the entire day of May 3rd. 1/3 of the white rioters were Memphis's own police and firefighters, who engaged in the killing and looting and even the raping of a few black women. By the end of May 3rd, 46 African Americans were murdered. 5 black women were raped. 285 more were injured. And over 100 homes and buildings were burned to ashes. No arrests were ever made after the riots. This is what was done.